Okay, so today we're talking a bit about improvised weapons and just the idea of what factors influence how effective or functional a weapon is. And there's this idea that sort of does form follow function or does function follow form? It turns out in the case of weapons, the function of the weapon definitely follows the form. And by that I mean the weight, the length, the shape is a big one. The shape of the weapon has a lot to do, it dictates more or less how you could use it, what the so-called techniques are. You don't just decide to use a weapon in a certain way. The shape of the weapon sort of dictates that you would use it in this or that way and that you wouldn't use it in certain ways. And so I brought a couple everyday implements, just things that are sitting around the house. One is a baseball bat, and I've had this baseball bat since I was 8 years old. I saved up the money and I was living in West Virginia. Wanted to play baseball with my friends, and I bought this bat. And for some reason, it has followed me ever since. And the nice thing is now, since it's an 8-year-old's bat, it's small for a guy my size, but it's perfect as a weapon. All right, it sits right on the cusp between a weapon you would ideally use with 2 hands, or that you could even get away with using it with 1 hand. You can do it both ways. It's right at that right size, that sweet spot. If it were a little heavier, you wouldn't quite be able to wield it with 1 hand. And so sometimes wielding with 2 hands is kind of clunky because your recovery from swings and the predictability of how and when you swing, when you hit with 2 hands, the other person can exploit that and make you miss. So this is the kind of thing you might have on hand at home. In my case also, I have things like metal shells. This is one of the smaller ones. There's also longer ones like these. Like a piece this long, right there. It is an ideal weapon actually. It's very hard steel. It's hollow but still thick. So it's not going to break, it's not going to bend, not easily. And you can still move it pretty quickly. This is a smaller one you could use in a tighter space. But I brought this one out for a reason. Because to me, what makes a weapon useful, it boils down to, in this case, a stick-like weapon. What makes it useful is a very specific thing. Very specific criterion. Can I roof block with it, and can I follow up with a good angle 1? What's my reach with an angle 1? What's my coverage with a roof block? This is right on the lower end. All right, any shorter and probably wouldn't be able to pull off a good roof block. So it's right there where you've got some coverage, and you could block with it, and you can follow up with an angle 1. That's sort of like my first test of whether this makes a suitable weapon. If it were longer, you'll have more coverage and more reach when you hit, but shorter. This is actually the length, by the way, just about the length of my long mag light. It's like a 4 or 5 D cell mag light that I'll carry when I walk my dogs at night or something. And it's very adaptable. You grab it at the end that has the light bulb on it, and then you're swinging down to the handle. You don't want to swing this way because you'll bust the head of the flashlight, and then it might come off, and then the batteries will fall out or something. So you hold it you can even be like this, shining in someone's eyes, or seeing what you're doing, then crack, you can hit with an angle 1 right off of that position. So again, the form of the weapon shows you how you should use it. If you think about it, you think about how you would carry it and use it. Now the other thing too is, the next theme of what I want to talk about here is that weapon size occurs on a continuum. You don't know what you're going to find in your environment. As weapons get a little bit longer, you run up against the limits. I mentioned earlier with that baseball bat. Now this is a baston, but it's 3 feet long, it's 36 inches. Most bastons are about 28 inches, 26. 36, if you have a strong grip and the technique and the size, you can actually swing it with singles, one-handed wielding method. But it's also that size, so if I need to or want to, I can hold it with 2 hands. I can roof and I can hit with 2 hands. But then we go beyond this size, which I like this size too a lot. Because like I said, I can hit with it, I get a little bit of a reach advantage where I can hit them when they can't hit me back if they have a shorter weapon. Now we get up to 4 feet, and now I've crossed beyond. I can't use this really effectively with 1 hand. Maybe for single swings, but I can't recover the weapon as well. So I've got to go to 2 hands. But you can use short stick sort of elements, tighter curves, all right? And you can do fast swing and recovery into thrust, whereas if I go another foot higher, or longer that is, into 5 feet and beyond, now it's just not the same. You can't recover. If you choke up on the weapon, you go from here to here to get a good long swing with a lot of leverage. The trade-off of getting that leverage is that the weapon wants to swing out of control. It's hard to reel it back in. You can do it, but the other person might also find a gap there that they could rush in and get you if they make you miss. So, see that the benefit of training with different weapons of different sizes is that you adjust your technique. And then you realize that out in the world, if I happen to grab a 2x4 or something, and it is just whatever it is, whatever length it is what you got to use. So you have to adapt immediately. The other point is we don't get to choose, ideally, what weapon we're used to. Like if I spend all this time training with a 6-foot bow staff, I may not find a weapon like that to use. I wouldn't be carrying my bow staff with me, so how useful is it at that point? So you have to think about, what am I going to do when I have a stick that's somewhere in between? Now another thing too, this is what I call, this is a very thick skin, very heavy piece of rattan. I call this my stick destroyer. If I got Jackson here, you'll notice the amount of mass this has. It's a good length, but as I'm swinging it, if he throws up a roof block, I can actually hit into it and it would cave in, boom. It's got so much weight behind it that he has to adjust his technique to where he pushes out with the roof block to help knock it, yes, to knock it off target better. That made it bounce off of the bubble and move around and then continue. So he has to make up for the lack of mass with a bit of push, right? A bit of force. But at the same time, over time, when we hit, let's just go 1 for 1. Notice how his just knocks out of the way. It almost knocks it back into his own face. And I'm not even really trying. Over time, and I've done this before, my students used to joke that I'd pull out this stick when I needed to sell more sticks, which isn't true, because it would just destroy their stick and there still wouldn't be a mark on it, because it just eats through the skin of theirs and it's fraying and then eventually it just bends. Meanwhile, this one is just like, doesn't even seem bothered by it. I'm not going to destroy your stick, but from here, you hit and see over time, it's knocking his back and it's also going to tear through the skin of his and destroy that weapon. So the toughness of a weapon also tells you what you might reasonably expect to do impact-wise when you're hitting. This, by the way, also has another benefit. These are hard to get, actually. Is that it develops such wrist and forearm strength. This direction, weapon retention, because you're wielding a weapon that's maybe 3 times the weight, maybe 4, I don't know, times the weight of a regular baston. And over time, you just get this really good, strong wrenching strength and kind of a flicking strength that you get from angle 1. You train out equal tick, etc. If you get used to this, your wrist will become very strong, very stable, and your grip becomes like a vice. So there you go. That's my little rundown of improvised weapons, but also, again, how to adapt to different sizes of the weapon based on what you find in the real world.